The Guggenheim. It's more than a museum. It's a masterpiece of modern architecture in NYC. People come from all over to see the spiraling, sculptural icon on Fifth Avenue and the seminal art inside it. If you ask the literature who made the museum happen, they'd probably tell you why the man whose name is on the building, of course, Solomon Guggenheim. The philanthropist, the collector, the founder, the man whose money and vision, the story goes, brought to life one of the most iconic art museums in the world. But actually, that version of history is incomplete. A woman had been left out of the narrative. The woman who was the real visionary behind it. Her name was Hilla von Rebay. And in the beginning, she and Solomon were more than colleagues. You might even call them friends. But after his death, his inner circle decided she and her ideas were too bold, too unyielding. Listen up, class. It's time for the full, unabridged story of the real intellectual architect behind the Guggenheim Museum. In today's lesson, we learn how it actually got started. Let's go back to May 31st, 1890, in Strasbourg, Germany, the day Hilla was born into a noble family. Her father, a Prussian general. Her art education, elite. As a child, Hilla was surrounded by the arts, and her education emphasized traditional classical art forms. But she wasn't satisfied with the traditionalist paths laid before her. She was curious about something more. She studied art in Paris, Munich, and Berlin, and met avant-garde artists like Jean Arp and Rudolf Bauer along the way. Around 1910, when Hilla was about 20 years old, she became intrigued by non-objective, or what we call abstract art today, a style that wasn't concerned about representing real-world objects. Instead, it focused on pure form, color, and emotion. For Hilla, this was revolutionary, and it opened up the new possibilities for expression. Now let's pause to go over what was happening in the art world at the time. The early 1900s was a period of radical transformation in the art scene. Europe was buzzing with innovation. Modernism was taking hold, and traditional boundaries were being pushed, pulled, and completely obliterated. Movements like Cubism, led by Picasso and Braque, were upending representational art by breaking objects into abstracted forms. Dada artists were rejecting reason and logic in favor of chaos and absurdity. And surrealism, with its focus on the unconscious mind, was starting to make waves in Paris. But this idea, art as pure, non-representational form rather than depicting real-world objects, was still far from mainstream, especially in the United States, where art collections were dominated by old European masters. Enough context, let's get back to the story. Fast forward to 1927. Hilla comes to the United States. At this point, she's fully captivated by abstract art. The following year, 1928, is when our leading characters finally meet. Hilla was commissioned to paint a portrait of Solomon R. Guggenheim. And here's where things get interesting. When Hilla and Solomon met, it wasn't all business. It was a meeting of the minds. Solomon, a man whose taste leaned toward traditional art, was immediately intrigued by Hilla's ideas about modernism and abstract art. He listened when she talked about the future of art, about the importance of breaking free from past conventions. Hilla didn't just paint a portrait of Solomon. She painted a portrait of an entirely new vision for art, one that Solomon could make a reality. She also shifted Solomon's perspective on what a collection could be. He wasn't just collecting art anymore. He was collecting a movement. Hilla helped Solomon amass works by the most forward-thinking artists of the time, like Kandinsky, Mondrian, and of course, Rudolf Bauer. And it didn't end there. Hilla had a vision for more than just the art. She had a vision for the space that would house it. She didn't want just another stuffy gallery with white walls and little plaques. She wanted the entire building to be a work of art. The vision began taking shape in 1939 when she helped open the collection's first physical space in Manhattan, a temporary location she named the Museum of Non-Objective Painting, a name that reflected the soul of the movement she championed. Not a monument to a single man, but a tribute to a revolutionary idea that art didn't have to represent anything to be meaningful. It could exist in its purest form. Color, shape, emotion. That was the whole point. Fast forward a few years to the early 1940s when Hilla, as the museum's first director, proposed a permanent home for the collection. And she already had someone in mind to design it. Frank Lloyd Wright, a bold choice. Wright wasn't known for museum architecture. In fact, the design he would go on to create, an organic spiral that defied traditional gallery norms, was so radical for its time, critics called it everything from a washing machine to an inverted oatmeal dish. But to Hilla, it was perfect. Wright's design mirrored her belief that art should be experienced, not just simply observed. The flowing upward spiral embodied the same ethos as non-objective painting: movement, freedom, transcendence. It was her philosophy in physical form. But when Solomon Guggenheim passed away in 1949, the tides began to turn. The board, now stacked with his family members and more traditional friends, started rewriting the narrative. Gone was the Museum of Non-Objective Painting. By the time Wright's building finally opened its doors in 1959, the name had changed. The Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. Which is a little like if the Eiffel Tower was named after Gustav Eiffel's banker instead of, Eiffel, the guy who actually designed it. And it didn't stop at the name. Despite being the intellectual engine behind the entire project for decades, Hilla was excluded from the opening ceremony. The woman who built the Guggenheim, who dreamed it, directed it, and defended it, was erased from its history. But as time passed, scholars and curators began to reckon with the truth. So next time you're walking that spiral ramp, staring up at the skylight, soaking in the swirl of the art and architecture, remember whose dream you're standing in. It wasn't just Solomon Guggenheim's. It was Hilla von Rebay's. She saw the future of art, and she actually created a space for it to come alive. Here at Actually History, we're seeing history through a new lens and giving credit where it's actually due. Most of our stories are based on this book, and she co-wrote it. This is, to her credit, Historic Achievements and the Women Who Actually Made Them Happen by Caitlin Colmo and Emily McDermott. We kindly ask, if you're interested in our mission, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. More stories to come. Class is in session.